These are the fabrics I'll be using for this tutorial. Now this is my satin and this is my Ankara fabric. Hello guys, my name is Amaka and this is Lizama Stitches. So you're welcome to today's tutorial. Thanks for being here. So in this tutorial, we are going to be learning how to make a bubu dress. But if you're yet to subscribe to this channel, please click on the subscribe button and also turn on the notification bell so that you'll be notified whenever I upload new videos. So let's get started. Now this is the fabric I'll be using for this tutorial. My fabric is folded into two. Now see, my fabric is folded into two. Now what I have here, I have 4 yards of fabric here. I have 4 yards of fabric here. Now my fabric is folded into two. I'm going to fold it again into four, just like this. My fabric is folded into four. Now I'm going to be taking my measurement from this point, from this folded part. This is where I'm going to be taking my measurement from. This is the folded part. This is where I'm going to be taking my measurement from. And I have my front panel and the back panel here. So now I'm going to draw a starting point, which is also going to serve as my shoulder line. So now I'm going to start by taking my vertical measurement. Now my waist point is 16 inches. I'm going to mark 16 inches. My waist point is 16 inches and my hip point is 24 inches. And the full length of the dress is 60 inches. 60 inches, and I'm going to use 1 inch. I'm going to use 1.5 inches for my seam allowance. 1.5 inches for my hemming allowance. So I'll connect the points. I'll connect the points. Now let me pull this up so that you see what I'm doing here. So this is the full length of my dress and this is my 1.5 inches hemming allowance. So let me connect the points because I know my camera is not covering here. So now this is the full length of my dress, which is 60 inches, and this is my hemming allowance, 1.5 inches hemming allowance. So I'm taking it down, taking it back. So the next thing I'm going to do now from this point, I'm going to take my shoulder, I'm going to take my neck line. Now my back neck width is 3 inches. My back neck width is 3 inches and the back neck depth is 1.5 inches. 1.5 inches. The front neck width is also 3 inches and the front neck depth is 7 inches. So I'll be working with 7 inches front neck depth. Now I'm going to connect the points. I'm only going to connect the back one for now. Then I'll finish up the front later. So this is my back neck line. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take my shoulder measurement. Now the shoulder measurement I'm working with is 14 inches. 14 divided by 2 gives you 7 inches. So I'm going to mark 7 inches here. Now take note, this is the folded part of my fabric. So I'm going to mark 7 inches here. 7 inches. So this is my shoulder measurement. Now from this shoulder point, from this shoulder measurement, I'm going to take my round sleeve. I'm going to take my sleeve length. Now I'm going to take my sleeve length. Now my sleeve length is 14 inches. 14 inches. But because my sleeve is going to have band, and that band is 2 inches. So I'm going to minus 2 inches from the sleeve length, which means which means what I'm working with right now is 12 inches. 14 minus 2 gives you 12. So I'm working with 12 inches plus half inch seam allowance, which I'm going to use to join this point to the band. So that gives you this. Now from this point, I'm going to come down by 1.5 inches for my shoulder slant. And I'll connect this point to the neckline. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to impute my armhole measurement. Now what I have here is 19.5 inches. So I'm going to mark 19.5 inches on this line. So from this point, I'm going to impute my round sleeve measurement. My round sleeve measurement is 10 inches. I'm working with 10 inches. So I'm going to mark 10 inches here. 10 inches plus 1 inch seam allowance. So now this is my round sleeve measurement. Now the same measurement I have here, 19.5, I'm going to bring it down here. 19.5. And I'll connect this point to this point. Just like this. Now the next thing I'm going to do, from this point, I'm going to come in by 1 inch. I'll come in by 1 inch, and I'm going to connect this point to this point. Just like this. Now after that, on the waist point, I'm going to take my waist measurement on the waist point. My waist circumference is 32 inches. 32 divided by 4 gives you 8 inches. So this is my 8 inches plus 4 inches seam, 4 inches for ease. This is a bubu dress. I want it to be very free. 4 inches for ease and 1 inch seam allowance and 1 inch seam allowance. Now on the hip point, I'm going to take my hip measurement on the hip point. My hip circumference is 40 inches. 40 divided by 4. 40 divided by 4 gives you 10. Gives you 10 inches. 10 inches plus 4 inches for ease. I want the gown to be very free. Plus 4 inches for ease plus 1 inch seam allowance. Now the same measurement I have here, I'm taking it down to the hem. The same measurement I have here, I'm taking it down to the hem. So on the hem, a quarter of my, so I'm going to mark my hip circumference divided by 4, which gives you 10, plus 4 inches for ease, plus 1 inch seam allowance. The same thing with this part. So what I have here is, okay. So now the next thing I'm going to do, now, I'm going to connect this point. Now from here, I'm going to go out by 1 inch, just like this, because I don't want it to be sharp. So I'm just going to connect it back to this point. So I'll avoid sharp edges. Now, so the next time I'm going to connect this point to this point, just like this. And I'll connect this point straight down to the hem. So I'm going to cut it, but before I do that, now on the waist point, I'm going to mark my pocket. Now from the waist point, I'm coming down by 1 inch for my pocket. So I'll mark it. And I'll cut. Now I'll cut only the back first. When I separate the back from the front, then I will think, oh, sorry. Now I'm going to add my seam allowance. So I'm going to I'll cut it. Now I'm cutting from this line. This is the line I'll be cutting. And I'll notch. Now I'm going to notch this point, the pocket, the hip, and the hem. Now the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to remove the front. I'm going to remove the back panel, then I'll work on the front panel. So let me remove the back. From this 7 inches, which is my front neck depth, I'm going to go in by 2 inches and I'll mark. Now I'm going to mark these 2 inches down to the hem. And I'll connect the points. stopped it here. I've stopped it here. Now the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to connect this neck, this neck from the neck width. I'll connect it to this 2 inches point. So just like this. Now I'm going to cut off this. I'm going to cut this off. So I'm going to take this to my sewing machine. I'll take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to join. I'll join the back panel and the front panel from the shoulder. I'll join the front panel and the back panel together. Just like this. So now this is the right side of my fabric. So I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to join it. So I'm going to join it right side facing right side. So I'll bring this part and I'll join this part like this. I'll join the shoulder. I'll join only the shoulder. And I'll join this shoulder too. Right side facing right side. I'm going to sew the shoulder. I'll sew this with half inch seam allowance and I'll sew here with half inch seam allowance. So I'm going to do it and show you the next thing to do. Now this is my dress is going to have pockets. Though my fabric is small, but I'm just going to manage it and still make pockets for my dress. Now I have 4 pieces here. 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 pieces here. So now I'm going to cut it like this. I'm just going to place my hand. There is no formula for this. I'm just going to draft out, something that looks like pockets. So I'm just going to do this, trying to manage this fabric. So the pocket is going to be very small. So I'll just cut this out. Let me just show you how to fix your pocket. So now I've joined the shoulder. I've joined the shoulder. So this is what I have after joining the shoulder. So let me quickly show you how to join the pocket. Let me show you how to join the pocket. Now this is my pocket. This is one of it. I'm going to place this. Well, let me turn this to the right side. Okay, so I've turned it to the right side. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to place, now look at where I notched the pocket. So I'm going to place this on this. This is one of the pockets. I'm going to place this on this point. Now I'm going to illustrate with pin. So I'll take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew it like this with half inch seam allowance. I'll sew it down with half inch seam allowance just like this. Now after sewing with half inch seam allowance, I'm going to push the seam allowance on the pocket and top stitch. I'll top stitch. Now the same thing I'll do here, I'm also going to do it here. Now I'll do it here. I'm also going to fix another one here. Now this is the right side of my pocket. So this is the one I've done. This is the one I've done. I'm going to push this seam allowance on this pocket and I'll top stitch. Now on this part, the front panel, I'm going to hold the front panel. Let me do it this way so that you will understand better. Let me do it this way. Now this is the back panel. This is the back panel. I've done the back panel and this is the front. This is the front. And this is the right side of the front panel. So I'm going to place my pocket this way. I'm going to place it this way. Now see the notch. I'll place it this way and I'll sew. I'll sew with half inch seam allowance. Let me also illustrate with pin. I'll sew with half inch seam allowance. And after sewing, I'm going to push the seam allowance on the pocket and I'll top stitch. Now after that, I'm going to join the front panel and the back panel together, just like this. Now I'm joining it right side facing right side, just like this. Now this is the back panel and this is the front panel. So this is it. This is the back panel and this is the front panel. So I'm going to, sorry, let me turn it this way. So now this is it. So this is the front panel and this is the front panel and this is the back panel. So after fixing the pocket that way, I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew it this way. Now I'm going to sew this way. This is how I'm going to sew it. I'll sew it like this with half-inch seam allowance. With 1-inch seam allowance now, I'll sew to this point and I'll sew to this point, sew it down, and I'll take it down to the hem. So that is it with the pocket. Now let's go back to the band. Let's go back to the band. Now back to the neckline. This is my front panel and this is the back panel. I'm going to measure this point. From this back point, I'm going to measure what I have here. From this back point. From this back point, I'm going to measure what I have here. I'm going to measure what I have here. Now take note. Look at my 7 inches. Remember that my front neckline is 7 inches. My front neck depth is 7 inches and this is it. So this is my 7 inches front neck depth. This is it. I'm going to notch it. Now, I've notched my 7 inches front neck width. So now the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to measure from here, from this back panel, the center back. I'll measure from the center back and I'll measure down to the hem to see what I have. Now, but first of all, I'm going to measure from here to this my front neck depth. I'll measure the width, the length. Now from the center back, let me turn it this way. So this is the back panel. So this is the back panel and this is the front panel. This is the front panel. Now the next thing I'm going to do, now I'm going to measure from this point, to this notched point, which is my front neck depth. From this point to this point. And what I have here is 11.5 inches. What I have here is 11.5 inches. Now from the back to this point is 11.5 inches. Take note of that. It's 11.5 inches. Now this is what I'm going to do. Now from this point, this is my back panel and this is the front panel. So from this back panel, from the midpoint of my back panel, I'm going to measure this. I'm going to measure this down. I'm going to measure it down. So this is the midpoint of the back panel. So I'm going to measure it this way. So now this is the front neck. This is the front neck depth. I notched it and the front neck depth is 11.5 inches. Now when I measure it down, this is 60. So what I have here is 66.5 inches. 66.5 inches is what I have. But from the back neck width to the front neck depth is 11.5 inches. Please take note of that. So now the next thing I'm going to do from this point, because my gown is going to have slits, I'm going to measure 17 inches from here. I'll measure 17 inches from here. So this is where my slit is going to end. This point, 17 inches. I'll notch it. So I'll notch this 17 inches point. So this is where my slit will end. Now the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to bring my satin. So this is my satin. Take note, I ironed interfacing on my satin. I ironed interfacing on my satin. Now the width of my satin is 5 inches. But when you place it on fold, you're going to have 2.5 inches. Now half inch, the extra half inch I have here is what I'm going to use to sew this. I'm going to use to sew on this. When I sew it, I'm going to be left with 2 inches. That 2 inches band that I removed from here, I still have that 2 inches band. So now from this midpoint of my band, now this band is folded into two like this. When I fold this band into two, this is the midpoint of my band. So from this midpoint, just the same way I measured 11.5 inches from the back panel to the front neck depth, I'm going to measure 11 inches. I'll measure 11.5 inches rather. 11.5 inches. So this is my 11.5 inches. This is my 11.5 inches. 11.5 inches. And I've connected it. I've drawn this line before. So this is my 11.5 inches. 11.5 inches. Now, let me still measure from here to the slit, to this slit. So this is the slit. Now the slit is 49 inches. The slit is 49 inches. So now I'm going to measure that 49 inches here too. From here to here is 11.5 inches, which is the measurement from the back neck width to the front neck depth. The back neck depth, the back to the front neck depth. So I'll continue my measurements. 49 inches, which is where my slit ends, which is the end of my slit. So I've marked it. "49 inches, I've marked it. And I'll connect it. Look at the next thing I'm going to do now. I'm going to mark half of this, the midpoint of this line. I'll find the midpoint of this line and I'll mark it down. So the midpoint is 2.5 inches. 2.5. 2.5. And I'll connect it. So now after that, I'm going to sew this. I'll take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to join these two together. You see how I placed it together, right side facing right side, and I'm going to sew on the wrong side, just like this. I'll sew it and show you the outcome. So now after sewing, now this is what I have. So I've sewn here. Now look at what I did. I didn't sew this part. I started the sewing from this line that I ruled. So now I started my sewing. You see that I didn't sew this part. I started my sewing from this line that I ruled here, and I sewed on this line, which is the midpoint of this band, and I stopped my sewing here. on this line, which is the slit, which is where the slit is going to start from. So this is going to be my slit. This is going to be my slit. So now this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn this like this. I'll take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to turn this like this. Now when I turn this, I'm going to have something like this. So I'm going to turn this like this. You see what I have. So I'm going to sew it. Now let me turn my dress. So now this is my band. Now this is my band. You see how my band is. So I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to start sewing it this way. Now this is the midpoint of my band, and this is the midpoint of my back neckline. So I'm going to sew it together. I'll turn it this way and I'm going to sew it right side facing right side. I'll sew it with 1/2 inch seam allowance, right side facing right side. I'll sew it like this. So I'm going to sew it like this. So I'll sew this. Now you see where the front neck depth. You see the front neck depth. Now the front neck depth and this part matches. They've aligned. Now, so I'm going to sew it down. I'll sew it to the slit. Now look at the slit. Look at the slit. You see the slit. You see it. So this is where you see that. Remember the line I marked for the slit where it ended. So now this is where my slit will start. My slit will start from. So this is my slit. So I'm going to hold this and I'm going to sew it down. Now when I sew it down, this excess I have here, I'm going to cut it off. Now after that, I'm going to come back to this one from inside. I'm going to also sew the same way I'm going to do this part. I'm also going to sew this part. I'm also going to hold this part and sew it. I'll sew it down. So for the sleeve now, this is my band. What I have here is I have 22 inches, which is a round sleeve. I have 22 inches by 5. Now this is 5 inches. From here to here is 5 inches. The width is 5 inches. When I place it on fold, it's 2.5 inches. When I place it on fold, it's 2.5 inches. I'm going to use 1/2 inch to sew it, and I'll be left with 2 inches. You know our band is supposed to be 2 inches. So now this is it. I'm going to place it this way, right side facing right side, and I'll sew it. I'll sew it with 1/2 inch. I'll sew it with 1/2 inch. After sewing, I'm going to turn it. I'll flip it to the right side. So that's what I'm going to do. That's it with the band. Then after that, I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew from the wrong side. From the wrong side. I've shown you how to sew your pocket. So from the wrong side, so I'll place my fabric right side facing right side. So I'm going to take this to my sewing machine. After fixing the sleeve, I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to turn my fabric right side facing right side and I'll sew like this. By then I must have attached the pocket. The same thing I did on this sleeve, I'm going to do on the sleeve. The same thing I did on this pocket, I'm also going to do on this part. So I'm going to sew my pocket this way. I'm going to sew it this way. I'll just sew this way. And I'll sew it down. So I'll do it and show you the outcome. So this is my dress. I'm done sewing. Now look at the neck. You see how the neckline? You see how it is? See how neat this part is? Now I've also fixed the sleeves. I've fixed the sleeves and I've also attached my pocket. Now this is my pocket. So this is what this dress looks like. Now when I turn to the wrong side of it, this is what it looks like. So this is the wrong side. This is the wrong side. You see the wrong side is also neat. So that's just it with this tutorial. I'm going to wear this dress and show you what it looks like.